Welcome to the Holistic Living Podcast, my beautiful friends. You can expect my uncensored, real, and honest thoughts on a wide variety of health topics. If you love to learn on ways to improve your health, your life, your mindset, your emotions, and everything in between in a natural way, you are in the right place, and I am so excited to have you here. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 25 of the Holistic Living Podcast. Today we're talking about 5G and the EMFs that come along with that and how it may affect our body. And I'm also going to give a couple tips at the end for how we can support our cellular health, as that is what is most negatively affected by the different electromagnetic fields that we are exposed to day. I came to the decision of recording a podcast on this topic today. I had someone at the gym ask me why I'm wearing the old school wired headphones instead of some AirPods. And my response was literally, it's like, I'm a crazy person. I was like, I know I look crazy and I'm going to sound crazy saying this, but I don't want those electric magnetic fields from the Bluetooth like right in my brain. And this person just kind of looked at me like I was a little wacky, but he was really polite. He was like, no, it's all good. I was just curious because it's 2023 and just wanted to know. I was like, yeah, that's the reason. So I was like, let's talk about this tonight. Now, before I jump in, I don't want anyone who does use Bluetooth headphones or anything like that to feel like you have to start completely changing up your life. It's just something to be educated on. A lot of people aren't even aware that electric magnetic fields, certain ones especially, can really be negative for our health. But I think with all of the studies coming out, we now know, and even cell phone companies are putting out warnings not to hold the cell phone near your head and things like that. So we now know that absolutely different electric magnetic fields or electromagnetic fields can cause cancer and affect us negatively, basically because they're damaging our cells. They're causing cellular mutations. So it is something that is important. And if we can eliminate or at least minimize as much of these EMFs as possible in our day-to-day life, it's going to help us a lot, hopefully, in the prevention of disease. Now, obviously, we're exposed to a lot of EMFs in our environment that we cannot control, especially if you live in a really big, busy city. For example, in Canada, if you're driving through Toronto, there are cell phone towers every few feet almost. There's so many of them. So there's a lot of fields that we are exposed to that we can't control. But we're here today to talk about some things we can control and just educate a little bit on this topic. So the first country that actually adopted the 5G on a large scale was South Korea. This was, I think, back in 2019. And since then, mobile operators and telecommunication equipment companies around the world have been working hard to kind of develop technologies and hardware systems required to bring in the 5G back in 2020. So once we were kind of having slow internet there for a long time. I remember when we used to have dial-up internet back in the day. And so it's come a long way. And while I do appreciate the speed, there definitely are some negative effects. Typically with the 5G specifically, and now there's obviously, Starlink and other projects in the works that are even way more damaging than 5G. So I know this is an older topic. 5G has been around for several years, but it's something I still want to bring up. Swedish telecom giant, I think it's called Ericsson, predicted that 5G internet will cover up to 65% of the world's population by the end of 2025. So it's really coming to be everywhere you go. It's very hard to avoid. We're already, like I said, exposed to so many dangerous electromagnetic fields that have the capability to penetrate our cells and cause damage to our bodies. But in case you're not up to date, 5G is currently the latest generation of technology outside of Starlink, and it works completely different than 4G. So 4G was and is also harmful, but it's not nearly as damaging as what's been coming from the 5G. 4G works with slower and longer frequencies, so typically it's below the 6 gigahertz level, whereas 5G works in the 30 to 60 gigahertz range, which is a lot stronger and shorter frequencies. So if you have the higher, shorter frequencies, which is the 5G range, They are the single most harmful EMF ranges for humans and the environment. So even though 4G was harmful, it's definitely not as bad, and it's not in the range where it can get absorbed into the body as much as 5G wavelengths can and are and will. So 5G waves penetrate the body cells much more deeply, and they're able to get absorbed directly into the body through our skin and can damage our brain and lungs and so many other organs. Radiation in the lungs can destroy our cells and prevent our body from being able to uptake oxygen from the air around us. And as a result, our cells and tissues can literally suffocate. It would be similar to being at extremely high altitude without an oxygen tank. And this is obviously from high and long-term exposure, but it's definitely something, again, to think about, as I always say. So the closer we get to the 60 gigahertz, which tech companies can increase at any time, the more damage it causes, which can lead to severe irreversible nervous system and brain damage potentially. But what I am focused on, especially being in the homeopathic field, is the destruction of our DNA sequence, which can prevent us from building new healthy cells. And we know that cancer and all these chronic illnesses come from cellular damage and that cellular mutation. So whenever I come across something that's damaging specifically our cells, I get hyper-focused on that because that is something that we really need to protect. So aside from this dangerous frequency being able to cause so much damage to us and our plants and animals, the scarier thought is that once it's up everywhere, there's no going back. So the more that we progress through the technology, which again, it's great in many ways, but the more we move through all of these technologies, where there's no going back. No one's going back in time to worse, slower, poorer technological times. We're always advancing. And so there's no going back. It's just going to get more and more intense from here. So there aren't really any effective natural remedies that can stop the body from the effects of EMF. Plants will also be lacking oxygen, which means the oxygen available to use from plants will also be greatly diminished for us. So that's definitely something to think about. Elon Musk's company has already placed, this number has probably changed from last time I checked, which was a couple of years ago, 10,000 satellites around the Earth. I believe it was by 2022, they were expecting to have more than 40,000 satellites. So I'm not sure what they have now, but these satellites are orbiting our Earth and they are releasing the incredibly harmful EMF radiation over every single inch of our beautiful planet 24/7. There's no escaping it. So again, people who think, I live out in the country or I live in a more remote area, Starlink is out there. There are satellites everywhere. You are being exposed to even worse EMF frequencies or electromagnetic frequencies compared to 5G. So 5G is bad, but it's a lot worse to have exposure to Starlink, which is eventually going to cover the entire Earth. So as 5G is rolled out around the Earth, there is a lot of potential development for chronic illness, disease, cancer, like I have mentioned. So I don't know about you, but I personally, even before 5G was out, even before cell phones were big, like when I was younger, I was always even terrified of the thought of being in front of a microwave. I would always run so far away from a microwave. And this was before I was anywhere near holistic and didn't care about anything holistic. I still understood the really dangerous causes of being exposed to different electromagnetic frequencies, and I would run the other way. Even today, we don't own a microwave. We haven't owned one. We never owned one. And growing up, we did have one in our home. But once I got married, it was like, no, we're not having one of those. So it's definitely a stressful thing to think about, but it's something because it's invisible, most people are not aware of. So independent scientists and tech workers from all over the world have been warning us about the irreversible consequences of 5G and have been predicting that within only a few years of its implementation, we will see an incredible amount of extreme exacerbation of disease, potential sterilization of men and animals, etc. They also did talk about the destruction of the ecosystem that could lead to the end of, at least to some degree, of farming and our food supply. There are videos all over the internet of people feeling shocks as they pass 5G towers and people having difficulty breathing near 5G towers, people's noses bleeding around 5G towers. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say this is conspiracy theory. I'm just sharing information and you guys can do with it what you will. And this isn't, again, to scare people or make people feel like they have to live in the 1920s, but it's definitely just think about at least what you're exposed to, and then you can do things to minimize the exposure. So, okay. If people are experiencing symptoms already with a slight increase in gigahertz, imagine what will happen when there's increases to the higher frequency ranges from Starlink when it surrounds our planet. It's definitely an overwhelming thought. Especially with self-driving cars and faster Wi-Fi, all of this technology that's coming out, it needs to be supported. So that's where things like Starlink and stuff are coming in, because we are growing rapidly in technology, and the 4G networks couldn't support it. And even 5G networks are having a hard time keeping up. So we always need more and faster and better. Okay. So many individuals and holistic professionals believe that 5G is potentially like a bioweapon. I don't want to get into all the conspiracy theory side of things, because I don't want anyone to feel triggered or stressed out or anything like that. But we know that since the 60s, or at least scientists have said since the 60s, that the exact range, the 30 to 60 gigahertz range, is the single most poisonous frequency for human life ever discovered so far. So it's definitely scary in that sense. And this is what we're all facing just living on this earth. And it's something that it's not going to change. And again, I'm not sharing this information to scare you, but rather to help you understand the dangers we're facing so that you can kind of protect you and your family as much as possible. So what can we do about it? First thing is obviously share the information with your friends and family. I know, again, it sounds quacky or conspiracy theorist, but it is a truth. There are studies out. We now know that different radiation frequencies will cause potential cancers and damage. The studies have been out. Cell phone companies, all of them are required to claim it. So now it's just a matter of understanding that it is the truth, accepting it, and then moving on from there. In terms of things that I want you to potentially implement in your day-to-day life, if you feel that it's worth it, is number one, turn off the Wi-Fi in your home. Now, obviously, again, there are electromagnetic fields penetrating the home from outside, from cell phone towers in your area, from Starlink and all these other areas. But anything you can do to potentially even minimize a little bit of it is important. So, sorry, just hit my laptop, but turning off your Wi-Fi router at night is really important as it can reduce your EMF exposure. And if you keep track of how you and your family are sleeping by just practicing this one tip, I think you might actually notice you might be sleeping a little bit better. So I physically say unplug your router before bed, as it's easy to forget to do. You can put an alarm on your phone to remind you, and make sure the power cord is grounded, so it has like a 3-pronged plug. And then for any like notebooks in the house, the newest MacBooks don't have that grounded power cable, so you'll need to usually purchase it from Amazon, but just make sure that it is grounded. And you can use Ethernet. So that's a better option. If you can minimize your Wi-Fi and plug your computer to Ethernet, that's even better. And I know the suggestion is not suitable for everyone, but if you are able and do not use internet like constantly, like elderly people, for example, this is a good tip that can be really helpful. And you can get really long Ethernet cables to run around through the attic or different parts of your home so that you can reach to different areas. You can also get an EMF testing meter, and it'll determine if the wireless levels in and around your home are slight, moderate, high, or extreme. And then you can take actions necessary based on that information to improve your meter levels. The other thing is using your cell phone safely. So your cell phone and laptop and iPad are likely the strongest sources of EMF radiation in your life. And even when they're not being used, signals are sent out almost continuously. And these devices emit pulsating close range radiation that does enter the body, even if they're in standby mode. So whenever possible, I say, number one, turn off the Wi-Fi on your cell phone and place it in airplane mode. Excuse me. Number two, turn off Bluetooth and try not to use a Bluetooth earpiece. And that's where those gym headphones come in. I know it's awkward, but using wired headphones can really help. If you're at the gym every day for 2 hours, which is pretty much what I do, imagine having 2 hours worth of Bluetooth going through to your head 2 hours every single day. That's 14 hours a week. So try to not use a Bluetooth earpiece if possible. And if you can, go the more tedious route with wired headphones. And also never hold the phone directly against your head. So instead of holding your phone next to your head during a call, I always will say use the hands-free or speaker mode or a wired earpiece. And then don't place a laptop or iPad directly on your lap or stomach if you can help it. I'm horrible for this. I'm going to be honest. When I'm working, it's always on my lap, and then I try to be conscious about it and I'll move it to a table or something. And also do not carry your phone in your pocket if you can help that as well. There are some, Josh Del Sol suggests using a Bluetooth earpiece. So there are some earpieces which will reduce apparently cell phone radiation as they remove any potential antenna effect up to your ear. Now, I haven't used these and I haven't looked into them enough, but you can definitely look into it yourself if you're interested. You can also downgrade and use 3G instead of 4G, which will emit much less radiation. So on an iPhone, you can go to your settings and then click the cellular tab and then cellular data options, and then you can enable LTE and select off and turn off the cellular data entirely if you want as well. You can even get an EMF blocking phone sleeve to further protect you from your cell phone's EMF radiation. I don't know how well these work, but I do know that they exist. Now, just a little bit of extra tips. You can get a wired mouse for your computer or laptop, a wired keyboard, and get rid of you don't have to get rid of, but if you're looking to decrease, wireless watches like the Apple Watch and Fitbits and things like that, obviously because they're always running on Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, you're going to have higher frequency penetrating the body through the skin. And then even like with your printer, if you're using it frequently, you can use a USB cable instead of the Wi-Fi option. Again, just to really shut off as much Wi-Fi as you can through the different devices in the home. I know this is not possible for everyone. And again, it's quite tedious. So these are just some tips. Don't feel like you have to do it all. I know this is 2023. We all have online businesses. We're all doing social media. So it's hard to really cut out all of this. But if you can even implement one of these tips, it can be really helpful. Now, in terms of some supplements, there are some beautiful homeopathic remedies that can help to rebalance and repair the cells. So if there is that EMF penetration and the cells are mutating or becoming damaged, homeopathic remedies can definitely work to some degree to rebalance and restabilize and regenerate the cells as they rebalance the vital force in the body. There's so many hundreds and thousands of different remedies, so I couldn't possibly recommend one, as it really is chosen based on a host of symptoms and genetics and things from the person. But I would say if that's something that you're really wanting to do, if you are exposed to a lot of EMF, if you live in a big city, if you are using cell phones and computers constantly, it might be something to think about doing seasonally. So check out, work with a practitioner or check out the concept of homeopathy and how it works on the cells and see if that's something that might be of interest to you. But also taking things to support our antioxidants in our cells, like glutathione, can be really helpful. Check with your doctor before taking it, but it's something to think about as well. Just keeping those antioxidants and cellular protectants high in our body so that if our cells are mutating or getting damaged, then there is some protection there with good antioxidants. So eating a really good diet, getting a lot of nature, grounding, being in the forest as much as possible, as plants do help to kind of ground and get rid of some of the EMF. So even having a lot of trees around your home is really beneficial. But those are just some tips and suggestions. Again, the concept of this was not to stress people out and make you panic, but rather just to be aware that there are some exposures that we have and to just do your best to minimize it, like not using your microwave as much. And again, turning off the Wi-Fi in your phone and not using a Bluetooth earpiece if possible. So just doing your best. And that's all we can do. Because again, once Starlink is covering the entire planet, there's really no escaping all of the EMFs, unfortunately. So it's more about doing what we can in our homes without obviously causing a lot of stress on our part, and just at least being aware of the negative effects that electromagnetic frequencies have on our body and on our cells. But I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a beautiful day or night wherever you are listening from, and I will talk to you in the next episode.